Hello, everybody. So thank you for joining me tonight. Well, I'm going to talk about what I like to call the maturescence rather than the menopause, partly because it's not a pause or an end, it's a maturing. And that's what I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about it both from a more modern Western scientific thing, like including hormonal changes and what they might mean, and changes in the body and the kind of symptoms that you might have. But I do have a perspective now of seeing that symptoms are really messages from our body enabling us to understand it better and to understand what our needs are. So they're not necessarily negative, because actually the maturescence is a time when we're maturing our essence. So I will describe what the essence is in a moment as well. And as most of you know, a lot of my understanding of this time and a lot of the tools that I work with are based on traditional Chinese medicine, working with the meridians. Now we have the 12 meridians, which a lot of people are aware of, even yoga teachers use them, which relate to 12 organs, but none of those 12 organs are our womb. And the womb is quite an important organ that is changing. And actually, we call our womb in Chinese medicine as part of our palaces, the palace of the child. So the womb is seen in Chinese medicine as very connected to the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the cervix, the vagina. And so it's not just seeing the womb in isolation. And that doesn't have one of the 12 meridians. So the womb is, or the palace, I'm going to call it the palace, is a core organ of the extraordinary vessels. So I will start with just a brief overview of kind of Eastern and Western changes and why I call it the maturescence. And then we'll do some movements for the extraordinary vessels. Now, I'm not going to explain the pathway of every extraordinary vessel in detail, but I will give you an idea of what its action is or what its essence is. And also I might name some of the points so you can look up the points. The points on the extraordinary vessels are all points on the 12 meridians, but the extraordinary vessels exist before the 12 meridians and they give birth to the 12 meridians. And the interesting thing with the extraordinary vessels is that when you work them, you combine 2 points from 2 different meridians, and that kind of sets in motion their more deep underlying connection. But even if you haven't really heard about the extraordinary vessels, I think most people these days have heard about the chakra system and the importance of the midline. And actually, the Chinese version of the chakra system are 2 of the extraordinary vessels, which are the first that arise, which are the governing vessel, which is the main vessel for the back of the body, and the conception vessel, which is the main vessel for the front of the body. And often in diagrams, they're shown as lines, just connecting points, but they're not straight lines. They are actually, when I work with them, I feel them in the body, they are much more spiraling like the chakras. And when you look at ancient Chinese drawings, I have a beautiful image of the inner landscape of the Chinese body, and that actually clearly shows the chakras. So people often think, oh, chakras, that's Indian, that's yogic, that's very different. It's actually not really. It's just the Chinese concept of the chakras is the governing and conception vessel, the yin, the front of the body, the back, but it's also the back. So they see them as spirals, but they do differentiate between the back and the front of the body. But they're obviously not obviously, but they're connecting through into all the core organs which are on the body. And so the lower points on them do connect more to our sacrum, our womb, our reproductive organs, base chakras, and then they connect to the digestive system, like the chakras. Then they connect up into the heart and the throat. It's important areas on the extraordinary vessels, and also the crown chakra, which is an extra point. And then, the third eye is an extra point, and then the crown chakra. So the crown chakra in Chinese medicine is governing vessel 20, the 100 points of meeting, and it's the most yang point. So we've got this is the central, sometimes it's called the central channel, but it's very closely connected with the chakras. And then from this central channel emerge the other extraordinary vessels. So coming back to why I say Maturessence, I like the name mature because it's a maturing of our body. And if we can see it in that way, as a coming into the second half of our life, in most traditional cultures, the life expectancy was considered to be at least 100. In some traditions in ancient China, it was 100, but in others, it was actually 120. Because in ancient China, as in many traditional cultures, they looked at the longer cycles in our life and how they play out in our body. And there's a circulation of essence that I'm going to talk about for ancient Chinese, which is 7-year cycles for women and 8 years for men. And there'll be a chart that I'm not posting immediately now, but you'll see in the recording, there's a chart that goes through these 7-year cycles. But there's also, and I'm sure many of you have heard of this, the 12-year cycles of the animals, the Chinese astrological cycles. And that takes 60 years to complete one cycle. So very much like in my diagram, I'm going to be talking about the first spring of our life, and then the first summer and autumn and winter, which is also an annual cycle, but you can see it as the first half of our life. And then the second half of our life, we have a second spring and a second summer and a second autumn and a second winter. And that's like this flow of longer cycles. And so if you see with the animal cycle, a whole cycle of that is 60 years. So 2 cycles of that is 120 years. But of course, we don't all live to even 100 years these days. I think that's a sad reflection on modern culture, that we've actually think that we've increased our lifespan, but we actually have been weakening our body by degrading the quality of food that we're eating. I think everybody is in agreement with that, especially in more recent times with ultra processed food, high intake of sugar, all of these things which actually disrupt our endocrine system, our hormone system, which is a key part of the changes that are going on in the menopause. So you can see it's actually not surprising that a lot of women in modern societies have symptoms in the menopause. Remember that I said that symptoms are signs that something's out of sync with our body. And in fact, for many women in the menopause, I find that it's actually changes in their diet that make a really big difference. If they're eating a lot of sugar, a lot of processed food, sugar including also alcohol, but also transformed food, dairy, wheat, a lot of things like that. I actually found myself in my perimenopause, my first shiatsu teacher was macrobiotic, and I was semi-macrobiotic and semi-vegan for many years. And I did like sugar in terms of dates and figs, which I thought was fairly healthy. And I ate a bit of other sugar, but not very much. And I drank a bit of alcohol, but not very much. But I found in the perimenopause, with all of the changes, that my body, probably for about 7 years, maybe a bit longer, became very sensitive. And the only times I had like a couple of hot flushes was just after I'd drunk some alcohol, even if it was only a little bit, or had even things like dates. And I got bloating symptoms when I had dairy or wheat. And I have found over the years and researching that that's a common scenario for many women. So diet is really fundamental. And in Chinese medicine, it was really emphasized what you ate is really important. And what you eat will affect your hormonal system. They didn't call it that. They saw it as the extraordinary vessels, which I'll explain in a bit. But what we eat has a big impact, but not only what we eat in terms of food, but what we take in terms of nourishment from our environment, especially in the form of relationships with people. So for them, it's also really important the quality of the relationships. Are we surrounded by supportive people or people that are draining our energy? And that can be something, a symptom of hot flushes could be that we're actually reacting to people in our environment, and we're getting angry or irritable, or stressed because we're not getting the support from people. Another key energy is the air that we breathe. And we know that the air that we breathe is much more polluted than the air of ancient times, but also it's influenced by all of the radio waves and internet and all the kind of things within the atmosphere that we've added in, even aeroplanes and satellites and all this stuff. There's so much more going on that we're actually having to take in terms of processing information, even if we don't consciously do it. So a lot of us are actually quite in our head, especially since the advent of mobile phones, and actually in our posture, we're up a lot. And this is also contributing to this too much energy in the head and not enough energy in the center of our body. And that's what we're going to be doing in some of the movements, is really trying to help us get a bit more centered. So again, a lot of the symptoms of the menopause are often not caused just by food, but by lack of movement. So air for the ancient Chinese was how you breathe, the importance of breath, as well as obviously the quality of the air that you're breathing. And again, also the people that are sharing the space with you as well. That's an important part. But then it's also, what do you do with this air, this energy that you're taking in? How do you circulate it in your body? Well, if you're sat a lot and not moving, then it gets stuck. And so that means the whole of your body can't really properly flow. And so movement, so especially in traditional Chinese medicine, Qigong and getting movements, but also they have a lot of movements that are quite similar to yoga postures as well. And so that's why I'm going to show you some movements that you can use to support your extraordinary vessels. So, looking at these influences, and when is the perimenopause? Well, the maturing of the essence, the quality of our essence or our being at any time in our life is very much determined by what I've just talked about. The food key, the Chinese would say, so what we're eating, but our relationships, but also the air key and how we move that air around our body. But there's also this inner clock, which is in ancient Chinese medicine, this cycle of 7 years for women and 8 years for men. And if you ponder the cycles of 7 in your life, the first 7 years are our childhood. The second 7 years are leading up and these days beginning of our fertile cycles, and then our fertile cycles until they start gradually winding down. Now, when exactly do they start winding down and how do they start winding down? I think that's really interesting because that's, again, determining our experience of the maturing of our essence, because we could see these 7-year cycles are different expressions of how our essence is maturing, how our body, how our being is maturing. And for some women, they're actually more healthy when they're 35 than when they're 25, because it depends what you're doing in your life. Maybe in your 20s, there may be a lot of emotional stresses, maybe women are not eating well, and then there's a shift, and then they start being more surrounded by nourishing relationships, and they're changing their diet. And so actually, in my experience, not just me personally, but with clients I've worked with, even the quality of the egg actually is transformed. It's not just an age thing, which I think often when we look at it from a more Western idea, well, we tend to think the more eggs we have, the better, but it's not necessarily that. You can actually influence the quality of the eggs through changing all the things that we've been talking about. So the Maturessence essence also in ancient Chinese was a specific energy that they talk about. The name in Chinese is called the Jing, and this is really our DNA. And well, it's more than our DNA. We could say it's our energetic DNA, and we know that our DNA, which is our genome that we inherit at the moment of conception, is constantly being transformed by our environment. And our first environment is the womb. So it's about our relationship with our mother and how our mother nourished us in the womb. And we now know that that is it is the foundation of our life, and key patterns are laid down. But the good news is we can always transform them. We can't change how we lived our time in the womb, but we can change our relationship to it, as we can change our relationship to our mother, and as we can change our relationship to ourselves. Nothing is ever fixed, and that's the beauty of it. And that's one of the gifts of the extraordinary vessels, is that they take us beyond just this limited perspective on our physical body, because in ancient Chinese we see ourselves as part of the whole environment. In fact, we can connect with infinity. We can connect with the energy before we were even born. And so we always have the capacity to transform. We don't have to live the same patterns as our parents. We can change. So I think that's really important always to emphasize that, and not to be like, oh, well, this and this and this happened. We can always change, because we can always change what's coming in from the outside. And that in turn modifies our essence. So the essence in Chinese medicine is it's our DNA. And that isn't really touched by the 12 vessels. That's much more the domain of the extraordinary vessels. The ancient Chinese didn't frame the DNA in the same way that we do now, but they did say time in the womb is the most important, and then it's constantly modified. Our essence is constantly modified through our lives. And so this essence, in Chinese view, is stored in our kidneys, which actually, our energetic kidneys are lower down than our physical kidneys. Sometimes people think that's a bit odd, because when I hold my kidneys, I'm holding my lumbar spine, and people are like, but your real kidneys aren't there. No, they're not, but that's actually where the kidneys began from. Our real kidneys started lower down, and I think it's amazing that the ancient Chinese sensed that that was the origin of our kidneys, which in modern medicine, they are an important organ. For the ancient Chinese, the kidneys are everything that they are in Western, in a modern view, but also much more. So they do regulate our blood. They do regulate our hormonal system. The adrenal gland is part of what the Chinese talk about the kidneys, but they also contain our energetic DNA, our essence. And so they guide our development. They guide also other organs within this system, are our brain. I talked about that. Our heart, so kidneys and heart, important. And also our blood and our bones. So the Chinese say that it's essence that changes in 7-year cycles for women as we're growing and we're developing. And at adolescence, our blood, so our blood for ancient Chinese is more than blood that circulates in our veins and arteries. It's also a nourishing energy, which has an extraordinary vessel that regulates all of our blood, the penetrating vessel, or the chongmai, but I like to call it the nourishing vessel now. And so, but our menstrual blood, they see as more than just blood as well. And it's more about our capacity to nourish in the first phase of our life, so before the menopause. Well, not from the beginning. Firstly, our essence is used to grow and mature our body. And it's only when we're reach a certain age, towards the end of our second cycle, that we have enough of this essence and the blood in our womb to nourish potentially the growth of another being. But then, at a certain point in our life, around about 49, or 50, which is halfway through our life. I say 49 because it's 7 cycles of 7, but of course it varies, and the ancient Chinese knew that. It's only like averages, which is 49, 50, and like a cycle is just a long period of time. It's not like every 7 years on the dot something changes. Everything in life is a continuum and prepares us for the next cycle. And so this cycle, halfway through our life, we need this blood for ourselves to support our bones, to support our brain, to support our growth and our maturation. So hence, that's why I like to say Maturessence, because this is to support us in our wisdom years, when we can use our energy in other ways. In fact, it's a liberation from that monthly cycle and being bound with our reproductive capacity, to being connected with other aspects of our creativity, which could be connecting with children as potentially our grandchildren or nieces and nephews, or in another capacity, they felt it was important to connect with childlike energy with children or with animals to keep young. But they also felt for us to keep young until the end of our life or near to the end of our life, it's about connecting with our inner child. They might not have quite explained it as the inner child way, but they did say that it's really important that even as an adult, we retain the awe and the wonderness and the connection to the present moment. And that's our first spring, being a child when we're discovering the world, the joy at discovering the world and being fully present. Children are very present in each moment because everything is new. So if we can keep that capacity of newness right to the end of our life, then we will be young. And that's the energy of our second spring and our second summer, which all come after the menopause. So in a way, we have a chance to repeat our first cycle of life in a second cycle of spring, summer, autumn, winter to transform our relationship with our mother, with our family, with who we are, and to enter a new phase of wisdom, we hope. So that's really how the ancient Chinese saw it. And in most traditional societies, women didn't have the symptoms in the perimenopause that women have now. It was much more considered to be a lightening of the body, a redirection of energies, and yes, and even in Japan, especially in Japan, but in parts of China and parts of Asia and other countries, even today, many women in the perimenopause do not have symptoms. So what are our symptoms telling us? So in essence, I'm using that word again, but I mean, the bottom line of all the symptoms really is a depletion of our essence, because our essence is our life force. I mean, it's the energetic DNA is what gives the basis for everything else in our body. And it's an energy that needs to last us till the end of our life. And in many modern cultures, women arrive in the perimenopause as their physical cycle of fertility is changing. They're exhausted, so their kidneys are very weak. So most of the symptoms of the perimenopause are weakness in the kidneys. Why do they have weakness in the kidneys? For many of the reasons that I've already said, because we're not eating as well as our ancestors. We've got a lot more stress in our lives. I didn't talk about that. And maybe we're not moving as much. But the stresses are, I think, especially for women, and we're talking about women for the Maturessence, men go through a slightly different process of Maturessence, that in modern societies, women are asked to do so many more things than they were in traditional societies. Yes, women did work on the land and they had a role beyond just looking after children, but they also had time off when they were pregnant, time off in between pregnancies, and their role as a mother or as a member of society, I feel, was much more valued than it is now, where a lot of the activities and things to do with motherhood and menstrual cycle tend to be devalued, and women tend to feel they have to justify themselves in essentially what is a male world, which is a much more linear cycle and working in a job often. I mean, obviously it's not the same for all women, but many women are working in quite stressful environments where they can't, even the fact of taking time during their menstruation to rest and renew themselves. We have these inner cycles. Women are on a monthly cycle and they need time within each month to rest and recover. And that really isn't valued. And then after birth, the postnatal recovery is devalued. And even women that don't have children, they're often working in much more stressful environments that women used to in the past, and often sitting. So they get a lot of sluggishness in the center of their body. And so moving the air key around the body is really important. So that's really the basis of a lot of the symptoms. So things like hot flushes is essentially because of a weakness in the kidneys, which isn't able to regulate the change in the flow of blood. Because essentially it's a redirection of our blood that instead of being used in the monthly cycle, instead of building each month and then being released, it's not going to be released because we need the energy for ourselves. So we need to hold it in our body. But if our body can't really hold and contain it, there's weakness in the kidneys, energetically it rises up. So that's how the ancient Chinese described hot flashes. But also this emotional instability, the heart also doesn't become settled and anchored. So we have a lot more energy in our upper body, our heart becomes more unsettled. That means our emotions become unsettled. So we get a lot of heat. Often this is expressed as heat, as fire rising. But in the back, there's coldness. So one of the questions I had at the beginning before I started recording was someone had symptoms of a mix of hot and cold. And that's the reason why the body can't regulate. There's weakness in the kidneys, which leads to an upward movement of the heart. And so I'll give you some exercises to balance that. So that's one of the main symptoms. But another is, problems in the pelvis, weakness, pelvic floor, hip problems, joint problems, all of that, maybe constipation. They're just showing a weakness in this area. That's also related to not lack of movement and also the girdle vessel and exhaustion. And other symptoms, I actually find that one of the main symptoms is shoulder mobility issues. Now, that can often be because someone's been only using one side of their body more than the other, or just not moving our arms enough. In modern societies, we often have our arms, more at this level, whereas in traditional societies, we'd be moving our arms up and crushing grain or digging in a field. And so the women had a lot more strength in their arms in traditional societies. But also energetically, it's when we have our arms like this, we're protecting ourselves. And when we open our arms, we're open to the world. And because we have so much information and because there's so many negative things or things that we perceive as negative going on in the world, there's a need for protection. And so we're often protecting ourselves too much. Therefore, we're not able to receive. And then also, we're just lack of movement. So, and also a typical pattern for women is by our nature, we're wanting to give. Our bodies are designed to nourish a baby, whether or not we do. And women are more likely to want to nourish others. Of course, men nourish, but in a different way. But women want to mother a lot more than men want to mother. And so we often focus too much on other people and making other people okay, and we don't focus enough on ourselves. And I think, again, that's a core message of the menopause, is that actually, if we want to be well for the rest of our life, we need to really start focusing on us and nourishing us. And so it's an invitation, if we have symptoms of tiredness, of being all over the place, pause, recenter, start looking after yourself. So I hope that's given you a bit of a feel. Gosh, I've talked for a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but there's quite a lot to say. The only other thing to say is we often are told, oh, but you've got hormone deficiency, in not enough progesterone, not enough estrogen, you've got to take HRT, and that will keep your brain youthful, and that will keep your body youthful. And I always tend to think, well, but if that's what's naturally happening, surely there's a reason. And hormones act on all the other hormones in our body. And if we start taking extra ones, and especially artificial ones, what is going to be that effect? Obviously, I know that for some women, they do really help. And so I'm not going to say don't take them, but I would just be aware, try to not take them any more than you really need to. And if you can, look after your body in other ways, because your body is giving you these symptoms to say, perhaps eat better, change what you're doing in your life, change the relationships in your life. And if you don't listen to those messages, then you're not really supporting your body and helping it to be well for the rest of your life. So short term, fine, but if you can, try and address what is causing the symptoms in a deeper, more profound way. But also bear in mind that our hormones are really going back to what they were when we were a child, before we started our menstrual cycle. And nobody ever talked about progesterone and estrogen deficiency for pre-pubescent girls. So for me, it feels like, well, we're just going back to our second spring. We can rediscover a new energy free from the menstrual cycle. And so we don't need the same levels of progesterone and estrogen because we haven't got our menstrual cycle. So it's just a natural adaptation in our body. That's my perspective. I invite you to share that. So now I'm just going to go through some of the exercises for these powerful extraordinary vessels, which ultimately connecting with our brain, our heart, our palaces, our womb, reproductive organs, and our kidneys. And then to just give you a little essence of each one. So I'm going to change my camera so you can see me standing, because as we've sat for a while and I've said movement is important, I thought it would be nice to share with you some standing movements for each of the extraordinary vessels. So now some movements for the extraordinary vessels. These powerful vessels that we could say are really linked with our hormonal system, so they help relate our hormones and our nervous system. The first one is the stepping, or the vessel of motility. So as we stand and we walk, and try and move your opposite arm and your opposite leg, then we're really regulating our central nervous system, which actually regulates our hormonal system. And there are key points around our ankles. The ancient Chinese understood that our ankles are very connected to our womb. Our feet develop first before our leg in the womb. So our feet do directly connect. Some of you are saying you're a reflexologist, can directly connect to our reproductive organs, but also to our kidneys. So simply by walking, we're giving some support and nourishment from the earth for our kidneys. And as we walk, we can find our rhythm. And we're making constant adaptations. We're constantly taking in from the earth. It's really good to start with the earth, I feel, because we're so connected with space and our heads. Just let our head calm down. Let everything drop from your head, through your shoulders, into your heart, into your womb, your palace, into your lower back, your kidneys, and feel how quickly or how slowly you want to walk, or even if you want to walk backwards or forwards, because all of this has an impact on your central nervous system, and especially if you're walking bare feet. It's really good to walk bare feet. A lot of people, and also, sorry, to walk on the bare earth. I'm not walking on the bare earth, but that's a really lovely way of connecting to the earth and grounding our energy and helping all this heat rising go down. And there is actually a kidney point on the ball of the foot. So we're stimulating that, especially if we go really slowly. We're stimulating that. And finding our own rhythm. How do we want to walk now? Do we want to walk slowly? Or do we want to walk more quickly? Or even do we want to run? You might feel, oh, actually, I've just been sitting down and I want to run quite quickly. So whatever movement you're doing, forwards, backwards, slow or fast, you might even want to turn, because we don't just walk forwards or backwards, we turn. So really tune into your connection with the earth and feeling the rhythm and how that comes into your pelvis and how that affects your womb, your reproductive organs, and your kidneys. It's helping to regulate your kidneys. But also then that helps your heart and your brain. So these yin and yang motility vessels, the yin and the yang Chao Mai, the name in ancient Chinese, end at the inner corner of our eye, which very much relates to our pituitary and pineal gland, how we take in light. Oh, I didn't talk about natural light, but that was really important. In traditional cultures, people only had natural light. They were more outside. Unnatural light really destabilizes our nervous system. Being outside helps reset our hormonal clock. So ideally, Outside on the earth, getting lots of light will help to regulate your central nervous system and your hormonal system, and therefore your maturescence, and you could even close your eyes as you're walking forwards or backwards or around, and that regulates in another way. It's very powerful. If you feel you're being overstimulated and want to just come back to yourself and focus on your needs, close your eyes or stimulate this point. It's called bladder 1 on the inner corner of your eye. The other thing I feel is really important is balancing, excuse me, lifting one knee up. And you can even do that with your eyes closed. You'll wobble a bit probably. But that's really good for helping the nervous system. Be like that of a child. Think of a child. The child vessels I love because it's like being a child and being playful and experience everything for the first time, having a lightness in the body. Reconnect with that and you'll rediscover your second spring, which will lead you into your second summer. So that's the stepping vessels. And they come into our center, which is our girdle vessel. I don't think that needs much description. It is our girdle. It goes to our perineum, so it supports our pelvic floor. Its top part is our ribs, so that supports our breathing. Breathing, very fundamental. So to support that, put your hands on your hips and just do some nice figures of 8. On one side, figure of 8, I love because that connects us to infinity. So figures of 8. And then the other way around. So a figure of 8 on its side we're doing, with the centre being the central channel, governing and conception vessel. So this is really helping us to connect a bit more with our midline in our pelvis. So feel like you're connecting with this midline. The figure of 8 spirals around the midline. You can just do circling movements around the midline and then do them the other way. This is really good for the girdle vessel to really get a nice flow in our pelvis, which will support our digestion. Now, I didn't talk about digestive issues. Often women do get digestive issues in the perimenopause, but then also it supports our kidneys and our palace. You can do more of a swinging movement on your heel. So this is like activating the stepping and the girdle, pivoting around. And with your hands, you can just touch your kidneys in the back. Nice and supportive work for the kidneys, just helping them to get a bit more stable and connected with the earth. And if you want to do a more dramatic version of this movement, so I am rotating on my heels. I mean, there is one way you can do it where you're stable, so your heels don't move, but you could also swing around. And then, if you want to do an even more dynamic one, you lift up one leg and crossing over your body, cross your arms the other way. So turn your head the opposite way to your knee and just repeat that a few times, bringing energy from the earth. This is a nice one because it balances heaven and earth. So bringing energy from the earth. And you can also use it to release what you no longer need. So releasing old patterns, breathing out, relaxing your jaw, finding your rhythm. So you could do it more vigorously, but then when you've done enough on one side, just coming back to the center through the stepping vessels, the motility vessels, and then the other side, starting quite gently, but then you can do it more vigorously, or depending on how you feel, listen to your body. If just the circling, the rocking is enough, stay with the rocking. If you want to really be quite vigorous, relaxing your jaw and your shoulders. And so coming back to the center. So our hips, our kidneys and our womb are very connected to our shoulders and our heart and our lungs and how we breathe. So, of course, we have another extraordinary vessel, the linking vessels, which is much more in our arms. Because when we walk, yes, we move our arms, but we don't lift them up. And it's what I was saying, in traditional cultures, women would be lifting their arms up and down a lot more. So even just this lifting up to the heaven and drawing down, stimulating the lymph nodes, which helps circulation in our breast, but also in Chinese medicine, this is the heart meridian. Breathing in, stretching up, relaxing your arms down, and then you can do that a little bit more quickly. And already that's opening your heart a little bit and releasing tension from your shoulders. But you could also start to open your shoulders and feel them a bit like your wings. We connect with our bird-like nature, and these are our wings which protect our heart, but also open our heart. The capacity of the bird is to be in its nest or on a tree or on the ground, but also to open up to space. And we too have that capacity. So do it in both ways. So this one is opening up from the center, opening your heart into space to receive. Breathing in as you go up, breathing out as you come back down. But also you can do it the other way, drawing in from space, drawing into your heart, protecting yourself, and then opening up, but doing it the other way, drawing into your heart. Then if you're comfortable, you could actually stretch up and then do a full move, maybe even sinking down slightly. Breathing up, breathing in and opening up, breathing out and relaxing down. Breathing in, coming up, and then really opening out your arms into space and then drawing down. Opening your heart to give, but also to receive. And then it's nice to do the movement in the other way. Opening backwards and drawing in from space and drawing down into your midline. Central channel, governing and conception vessel. Drawing down. Our wings. You could even do more Qigong type movements where you're opening up your wings and drawing them in, and even coming onto one leg, drawing up your arms, coming down and alternating, and feeling this time a lightness in your legs. A lightness. And you come down, you connect with your heart, and you open up, and there's a lightness. And then you come down, and you open up. Even just softening your hands like a bird, feeling the tips of your wings, and coming down, and opening up like a bird, maybe alternating from side to side, keeping your arms fluid, your feet light. It's the opposite of the stepping vessels, maybe even turning slightly. So the bird. And all of this is to bring the energy of space down into your body, down to your heart, and resting. Feeling the inner wings of your heart. This is your Chongmai, sea of blood vessel, penetrating vessel. I actually like to call it the nourishing vessel now, because it's really about, again, how you open the more intimate aspects of your heart to others, how you connect with your breasts. If you have children, how you've nourished your children. And then your heart can open more intimately. You can turn, but you can also receive more intimately. You can do a few spiraling movements to the side, and then just drawing down and drawing down to your center. Maybe making a little heart with your hands. This also is connecting a mudra I've created for the extraordinary vessels, thumbs together, index fingers, all the fingers touch the opposite, but with your thumbs and index you make a figure of 8. Infinite connection to your heart, just spiraling around for a moment, connecting with the girdle of the Daimai, pausing, breathing. This is the Chong, sea of blood, drawing energy down to the earth, anchoring us. So now we could take one leg and do a different balancing than the stepping. I'm not on a very stable surface. So stand and balance, connect with your palace, your kidneys at the back, and the wings of your heart. And then you can open up your heart to space. Feel that you can then draw the energy back down to your heart, to your kidneys, to your womb, and to the earth. And then you can do the same on the other side, taking up, holding on the inside of the big toe, that's the spleen meridian, holding your center, your pubic bone, engaging your pelvic floor, connecting with your kidneys, connecting with the wings of your heart, your breasts, connecting, opening your heart, this is heart meridian, in the armpit, opening your heart, opening up to heaven, turning your hand and drawing the energy back down. And you can repeat that. I will just pause for a moment. The penetrating vessel, sea of blood, when that is flowing well, nourished by your kidneys, nourished by the earth, nourished by the space and the air, then your energies will be able to find more of a balance. And you can have your eyes open or closed. You can stay standing, or you might want to take this opportunity to slowly ease down, perhaps into a squatting position to be close to the earth. But you may even want to lie down or sit. So sitting, maybe touch the inside corner of your eye. Maybe close your eye. So close your eyes and just go inwards. This is going into the winter cycle of the annual cycle and the nighttime part of the 24-hour cycle. To just withdraw from the outer world, to go inward. Winter isn't only at the end of our life or the end of the perimenopause, it's the end of every day. We need this rest time. We need to go into the yin, to close our eyes, to let our outer body, to let our physical body rest, so that all that's going on inside our body can keep supporting us in a different way during the night or during meditation or rest. We don't have to wait for the night to rest. Whenever we're tired in the day, ideally, we want to be able to rest. Of course, that's not always possible. But even just closing your eyes for 10 seconds can give your body that reminder that you do need time to rest. And so in this more restful pose, Just letting the energies be more still, more inward, and be able to support you in a different way. Helping your energies to find their own inner balance, because we're all different. Some of us need more earthing and grounding and much more stillness. Others need more activity and fire and action and outward focus. But the outward needs a balance of the inward, and the inward needs a balance of the outward. So just allow your body to find the balance it needs. And in this inner pause, listen more deeply to the messages that your body is constantly sending you, and reflecting on how you can support your needs. Whatever cycle of life you're at, but especially in your maturescence phase, so that you can connect with other aspects of your being and tapping into the wisdom of your body. But do take your time to stay resting for as long as you need. So with that note, I will let you rest as much as you need, and thank you for sharing this time with me.